Hello, good morning, Mary.
Good morning, Cherie.
Good morning to everyone. My name is Cherie Roberts, and I am here in Arden, North Carolina, and I'm joined by Mary Coelho from Cambridge, Massachusetts. We're very pleased to have her today. This is an interview for the Quaker Universalist Fellowship, known as QUF, and Mary is going to stand up to a number of questions, and we'll learn a lot more about her. First, I'd like to introduce her. Mary Coelho is a multi-talented and very focused and dedicated individual. Her curriculum vitae tells the story of an inspired person. She holds degrees in biology, teaching, and theology, with a master's in divinity and a PhD in historical theology. Mary grew up as a Quaker and belongs to the Friends meeting at Cambridge, Massachusetts. She has worked in a number of diverse positions as a research assistant in a renal physiology laboratory, a high school biology teacher in Buenos Aires, and a coordinator and occasional lecturer at General Theological Seminary in New York City. But in 1983, she found her niche in art and writing and has continued this path ever since. Mary is a prolific writer with books and many articles to her credit. Of note is the work entitled Awakening Universe, Emerging Personhood, the Power of Contemplation in an Evolving Universe. Most recently, Pendle Hill published Recovering Sacred Presence in a Disenchanted World as pamphlet number 433. The ideas in these and many of her articles have also led to several workshops at Friends General Conferences and other notable events. I know she will discuss her ideas in these publications today with us. In addition, she has many other articles and pamphlets to her credit. She also dedicates her time and knowledge to a number of boards, including the Steering Committee of Quaker Earth Care Witness, the New Story Group at Cambridge Meeting, and Manhattan Friends Committee on Unity with Nature, where she was both the founder and the clerk. Also central to her life is her work as a watercolorist. Her website at http://www.new universe story displays her collection of works exhibiting the mysticism found in her literature. The watercolors are drawn from her breakthrough in understanding the depth of human belonging to the earth and the universe. Celtic knots appear in many works and express the universe and its undivided wholeness in flowing movement. These paintings are a delight to the eyes and provide a vision of images of the unfolding story. When we complete the interview and post it to the QUF website, there will be a link to Mary's work that you can reach. We are fortunate to have Mary Coelho with us today, and we look forward to her many insights. So, Mary, we thank you for joining us today at Quaker Universalist Fellowship. So let us start, Mary. We have some questions to pose to you, but first we would like to hear about your life's journey. Basically, how does a brilliant young woman with a degree in biology working at a Columbia University renal physiology laboratory transition to a talented watercolorist, an author, and lecturer about the relationship of numinous experiences in science? Please tell us.
Well, I wish I could tell you that, answer that directly. That would be a feat. But I would thank you. I would like to tell you some of my story, which I hope will illuminate your question. I did grow up as a Quaker in New Jersey on a farm. It was a Quaker family on both sides of my family, and we spoke plain language, so it was very much a friend's milieu. I feel fortunate living on a farm, spent a lot of time outside, and that was very important. although I do also want to mention there was a very difficult side to my early life because my parents lost a child, a 4-year-old boy, just when I was an infant. And that, some of you may understand the loss of attention and being part of such a trauma when my parents were preoccupied with that did affect me quite profoundly. And it's not an uncommon experience of people live in families with parents lost in alcohol or drugs or something like that. So it's not an uncommon experience, but it's very costly, and it does have to do with my story. I did go to a friend's elementary school. That was formative. And in college, I went to a women's Presbyterian college. I want to mention something about that because that also is, as in hindsight, very formative. It was a Presbyterian college in which for some years we were required to go to chapel every day. And at the same time, I was a biology major, and I learned from particularly the slant of the professor, a very reductive worldview. I learned that what's now called a neo-Darwinian view of evolution, that everything is, all of the unfolding of the world has no direction and no purpose, and it's all based on random genetic change. And so that there's right that human beings with self-awareness that's not significant. Morality and religion are simply strategies for survival. And I remember pondering that was a very heartless, cold worldview. And so I learned that. I mean, I was taught that by this professor there. And that is a belief system is embedded in the institutional culture of science. And it's quite common. And it has its truth, and it has been about, some of the assumptions have been, of course, valuable for science research. But there was a real two world. Was exposed to really two worlds there, which is very much an issue now, I think, for our culture. Parker Palmer says the Western culture has a million ways of reinforcing the illusion that the world consists of inert stuff out there, and that we are the active agents of change whose role is to get that stuff in shape. So, and that is what I was taught through science study. So although I didn't realize consciously how important that was at the time, but I definitely entered that world. And then as Cherie says, I did work in a research laboratory, and that's where I met my husband, and I did teach biology in Buenos Aires. And when we were moving, I spent 4 years in Buenos Aires, and when we were moving back to the United States, I remember an important thing. I gave away my Quaker books. I don't know which one it was I was reading, but maybe probably Thomas Kelly, and I thought, this speaks the words about the spiritual experience. I thought, this sounds very nice, but I really don't know what he's talking about. So I gave them all away. Kind of annoyed, I guess, or gave up, I think. But then back here in New York City, I did have a very important experience of an awakening, I think really is to be called a mystical experience, completely unexpected. And I didn't say anything about it for years and years, so I think it was so important. I didn't understand how to talk about it, or I was afraid it might be negated because I knew it was so important. But that was a real shift in my direction in life. One of the things I thought from this story, from what happened, I said, this didn't seem to be appropriate, but I thought, I know the answer to humanity's problems. That's kind of a bold claim, but I felt that what I had known was, in some sense, an answer, and well, I couldn't defend it. And this also was a healing experience. It changed me psychologically. So as a result of that experience, did eventually go to Union Theological Seminary in New York City. Although it was helpful, but there wasn't a great deal of focus on personal spiritual experience. So some of the help I was looking for of how to fit that into some of my assumptions and how to find that again I didn't really find there entirely what I wanted. Although I did become acquainted with Jungian thought, and that was very helpful. I worked with a Jungian analyst, and then I did study at Fordham University because it's a Catholic Jesuit university, and they have continued somewhat more than, at least at that time, in union with the experiential tradition. So it was a place where I could study the contemplative tradition, people like Teresa of Avila and Meister Eckhart and Francis of Assisi. So, and I did write a thesis on Teresa of Avila and the reasons, trying to understand. She says very clearly the reasons what prevented her initially from entering what she calls the unit of life. So very helpful. And I went to Fordham because of you were cousins. Some of you may have heard of me as a Bonaventure scholar who wrote about Francis of Assisi. All the time I was studying some of these things at Fordham, I still had some of the assumptions from the kind of mechanistic worldview that I had learned as a biology student, unexamined assumptions. And then I was listening to a video series prepared by Brian Swim. Maybe some of you heard of it, The Canticle to the Cosmos. I can remember very well. It was shown at a Universalist church in New York City in Central Park West, and at some point he spoke about what he called the within, or what I think it's Teilhard de Chardin calls the within of matter. He described how what we call matter is 99.99% empty space. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is not the world that I thought I was part of. Because I had this image, again, unexamined. I really had an image of matter being made of little tiny pieces of matter I think they describe it as some pieces that can no longer be divided, little particulate pieces that can no longer be divided. It turns out that just does not exist. And to me, that opened a whole new world. I thought, oh my goodness, there's a place in the world that science is described for this origin of spiritual experience, or mystical experience. It very likely arises from this creative emptiness. I'll say more about that, but that, for some reason, for me was, I can see, it was very important for me. And so I began studying this worldview that's emerging from these breakthroughs in science. And that really ended for me the two separate worlds. Because when I went to the Union Seminary, I thought I was leaving science. And in a way, I was, of course, as a specific discipline. And I don't mean to collapse the disciplines, but it is only one world. And fortunately, there's some important breakthroughs that are very helpful for beginning integration. And I was so excited about this, what I was beginning to learn from the breakthroughs in science. I wrote the book that Cherie mentioned, Awakening Universe, because I thought everybody has to understand this story. It's so important. Of course, not everybody has the same background I do, but it is an important new story. And in the book, I did try to integrate some of this evolutionary story coming out of science with the personal search for spiritual fulfillment. You see, I don't know anything more.
Can you say a little bit more about the change in understanding about matter and why it was so important to you?
Yes, yes, yeah. It's physicists. Some physicists say this by saying that they say matter is immaterial, and that, well, and as I had said, they didn't find any particular piece of matter, and that atoms are 99.9% empty space. Hans Peter Dürr said, whatever matter is, there's no such things as matter in what we commonly assume it to be. Brian Swimme uses the image of the baseball field, where he says an atom can be imaged as like with the nucleus of the atom, a small ball on the pitcher's mound, and then the electrons are like a baseball hit very high above the stadium by the batter. That's the electrons, and then in between there's what seems to be empty space. But then this so-called apparently empty space, it was initially thought to be a vacuum, David Bohm says it's a plenum, which means it's full. It's described as the basal generative power of the universe. It's an ocean of potentiality. So it can't be measured by usual scientific means, but it is a creative plenum. The root foundation of anything, any being, is not the matter out of which it is supposed so much as the matter together with the power that gives rise to matter. So that was the key discovery for me. And this opens wide the door to me to affirm the immanence of the sacred within the person and all the earth. And that began to open for me with a phrase which I'll maybe keep mentioning, is that we're internally integrated into the internal dynamics of the world. So our internality is integrated into this internal plenum. That's how deeply we belong. That's a key phrase, our internal integration into the story. And then also I want to mention there was another, besides this powerful plenum, this within to matter, is also the discovery of non-locality, which is another most remarkable, unexpected discovery, which I think it does affect our understanding of what we're part of. And you've probably heard of the experiment where coupled electrons who have opposite spins, when they're separated, no matter by what distance, when one takes a spin up or down, the other instantly takes the opposite spin. So there's no occasion for this, like something like the speed of light, to have brought the information from one particle to the other. So somehow these particles are already coupled. They're part of a unity. So that when one takes a certain spin, the other does simultaneously. And that's a picture of a unity that many people are struggling with and trying to understand. But it says a lot about what we're part of. It's quite remarkable. So kind of in summary, Erwin Laszlo says the revolutionary discovery is that the root of reality, there is an interconnecting, information conserving, and information conveying cosmic field. It seems to me that this has to refer to what the word God has been pointing to. We'll discuss that word later, but of course God has, we can come to this, but God has many associations of often external to the world, but maybe this internal, it seems like this internal reality must be pointing to this dimension so many people have experienced. And the whole question of how we will name it is the whole big question. But I did not know. I have within me the very creative dynamics that are behind the manifest unfolding of the earth. I think this discovery of the within by science is a great gift to us all. It's a gift to universalism because it's a common within everyone. So it is a gift to universalism. And then the question of how it's named and understood, of course, is a very big question. But to have science discovering this realm, this seems to me, I don't see how it cannot be very important to spiritual seekers.
Yes.
And then I just want to mention there's lots of names for this inner within. Some come more from the science side, come more from spiritual traditions. And I'll say, I think science struggles, they don't know what this vast within, they can't really measure it in the usual ways science behaves, so it's very, very difficult to detect its nature. And then likewise, spiritual traditions have always spoken of a not knowing, the mystery that we can't rationally identify well what this inner reality is, what its nature is very well. So some of the names, just to point them out, are Teilhard de Chardin spoke about an ocean of energy. David Bohm spoke about an implicate order that informs the physical world. Is sometimes called the aliveness, the all-nourishing abyss. Paul Tillich spoke of the ground of being. Quakers have spoken about the light, and then the inner fire, and the one. So it's a pleasure to try to learn from science and from spiritual traditions something of the nature of this inner reality. There's been a long struggle about naming this realm, because if you name, you tend to objectify, and they always talk about how language is used to describe things in our everyday world, and that we don't have language to describe this world. So it's an enormous topic, and but I think new materials helps us work with it further. So that's what, and then I also wanted to say, in addition to the within of matter, I also wanted just to mention this whole new story and the evolutionary story awoke again my interest in, or I had studied evolutionary biology, and it had become sort of just knowledge about, I have a backbone that came from early chordates, or whatever their origin was. But then the depth of our physical immersion in this evolutionary story became much kind of awakened and very interesting to me. And this is, I don't know if you can see this, but this you can't read this, but this points to some of the parts of our anatomy that are so ancient. It's hard to fathom. For example, I don't know what would be, one I like is a rotating shoulder. I often, watch a baseball player or watch a gymnast and see that rotating shoulder that clearly comes from an arboreal ancestry. And cows and pigs, they don't have a shoulder like this. And then, of course, the carbon atoms in our bodies made in stars. And I like the fact that the water in our bodies apparently has this salinity of the early oceans, not the salinity of the oceans now. So there's a whole list of ways of seeing the depth of our immersion in this story. And I even know, walking down the street, there's a little nursery school nearby, and the children, they take them outside and they walk along. They have the children holding a little rope behind the teacher. The rope has little handles on it, and the children hold the handle and they walk behind the teacher on the way to the playground. And I think those children never let go of that rope. They hang on. They just automatically hang on to that rope. You might think they'll just let go and run off when they see something that attracts them. But that hanging on like that, that's a primate activity. Hang on.
Wow.
I just love seeing that.
Yes.
So I think, so I guess it's the belonging both internally and in the with physical manifest world. It's exciting. That's all.
Well, has your understanding through this period of discovery changed your concept of mysticism?
Yes, I gave me a great deal of confidence that it's not something extraordinary, given what we said about the nature of matter. So this discovery of this plenum encourages us to explore how mystical experience may have its origins in this inner quote unquote emptiness, energetic reality. And John Seed says that many earlier peoples, philosophers, poets, theologians, would have loved to have known this discoveries of science. They like to have had they known. So explains that Dovesbury says that one of the reasons we have had trouble with always valuing mystical experience is that the experience comes from so deep inside us that it seems as if it came from outside us, because it's not something that we're consciously familiar with experiencing. It seems as though it comes out from the outside, but now with this discovery about the within, we can see that it comes from within and around us. And I don't know how much time, but there's a lot of, for example, like Teilhard de Chardin, who's one of the thinkers whose work is behind this integrating of the breakthroughs in science with spiritual traditions. He was drawn by matter, by something that shone at the heart of matter. He experienced something that was behind his work with this integration. So there's lots of examples that I won't take time to show how the experience and the thought have gone together. And another thing is that the culture hasn't always encouraged the importance of it. But in this context, I think it can be encouraged to search, to know this inner well. In this new context, things like mystical experience or other forms of touching into this realm is a birthright of everyone. Mm-hmm. It's not something that comes and goes. It's there. And also, I like David Steindl-Rast speaks of mysticism as about infinite belonging. I really like that. A very deep belonging. As one who, as I mentioned, some loss of belonging because of my family situation, the death of brother. This belonging, because is a very important recovery belongings. So yes, mysticism finds a home in this new story.
Mm-hmm. Well, are there other changes in your understanding coming from the new story that have been important to you? I know you talked there about many of these issues really are very universal themes.
Yes, exactly. It seems so appropriate to be speaking with you in Quaker Universalist because
yes,
it's a common origin story. It's a gift. I think it's a gift to your interests that you want. Mm-hmm. And another, you ask about any other change that has been important. And one is that, we have a new story group at Cambridge Friends Meeting, and we read a book called Evolution's Purpose by Steve McIntosh. And right away there in that title, Evolution's Purpose, in some circles, that's a bold claim. because, as I said, when I studied biology, I was taught it's a random purposeless universe. And McIntosh says that the unfolding history of evolution reveals a rising flow of value generation. And these values are the ever-widening realization of beauty, truth, and goodness. So I thought, oh my goodness, is there really a directionality towards increase or deeper entry into beauty, truth, and goodness? It's a bold claim, but we all probably have experiences of this, like the beauty of a song touches us deeply, and then he says it allures us. Somehow we're very attracted to these occasions of beauty and truth and goodness, and that's part of the direction of the evolution in consciousness. Is this being attracted to beauty and truth. And it's not only McIntosh, Albert North Whitehead argued that beauty, or the perfection of a harmony, is a universal aim of development. And Whitehead said that beauty is the final contentment of the eros of the universe. So others have been looking in this direction. Teilhard de Chardin spoke of an omega point, some kind of sense of directionality. So, I just wanted to mention this. This is controversial because it's always, we were taught, and it's also true that some evolution occurs when there's mutations, and that's the cause of change. But there's something called I read about the Baldwin effect that recognizes that there's another power now in evolution besides genetic mutation, and that's which is a source of evolutionary change, and that is consciousness, the change in culture and human consciousness. And there's certainly a clear influence of human consciousness over the destiny of the earth, and to have it seems very important. That's no longer a machine, but that our attraction to truth, beauty, and goodness maybe are expressions of this allure which is involved in direction. And it was helpful for me to understand that some people distinguish some phases in evolution. Like there's a time when evolution was in the cosmos. It was in what happened in the formation of elements in stars, the creation of galaxies. That was one occasion, one phase of evolution. And another phase is when life came on Earth. That's a different phase of evolution. And so the changes, the way you understand evolution when there's living beings is different from the cosmic evolutions. And that's when you may talk about genetic mutations and things. And then it's thought that with human self-awareness, there's another kind of, the nature of change is different because of our consciousness. And that also is, some understand that to be evolutionary. It's not changing genes, but but that our consciousness is affecting the unfolding of the earth, and that it is evolutionary, and that we have different purposes. We have a long-term, our consciousness gives us these purposes, or we seek purposes that are evolutionary in nature. So that's, and so this directionality, I think, is very, very important, although it's disputed, but I think it's true. And it gives us hope, because if we have a sense of being part of the creation of beauty, or defending truth, as Quakers have sought to do, that gives hope that maybe there's some sort of support in the nature of things, or some directionality. It's not just random. I find that very hopeful, important to investigate. So,
Well, just adding on to that, can you just speak to any of the other kinds of intersections between Quaker Universalisms, and the New Story? What are sort of the elements of intersection?
yeah. Well, I think it seems to me that as I would understand it, Universalists are earth beings who came out of this story and whose nature is being understood about the nature of matter and direction. That seems to me, and Universalists would nest themselves, so to speak, or place themselves in this story, as it gives us identity. So there's in the midst of cultural evolution, cultural diversity and ethnic diversity and diverse traditions, there is this enormous commonalities held together. And I didn't mention that one of the understandings about the direction of the universe is that it can hold together diversity and unity. That this common story is a unifying story, but it can hold diversity as in the natural world and in human diversity. So I think it's a basis for holding together or integrating diversity within Quakerism. And so I would advocate that we all need to learn this story because it is a basis of dialogue, so that diversity is celebrated in the context of our common story. Seems to be.
Now, would this be this would be all things on Earth, plants, animals, humans, all things of nature as well?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That out of the early Earth, this enormous diversity.
Yes.
Did develop, and the common ground of this common ground, the within of matter and it's pretty, complex how all this diversity developed. But yes, it's a common story, which includes arrival diversity.
So how do you defend the idea that there is direction in evolution?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because it has been much of some of the Orthodox neo-Darwinism says it's random. But now, what I've come to read and understand is that to understand directionality, you have to realize that there's emergence in the evolutionary process. An emergence describes the appearance of genuine novel structures in the evolutionary story. There's real newness, new developments. And these new developments are not just the sum of the parts that made it, but that things really new emerge. And one example would be that who would have imagined, I guess, in the early Earth, in this soup of chemicals and whatever, lightning, I don't know what all the early Earth, life emerges. That's a newness.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah. And that's an example of emergence. And that's a form of directionality. So I think the story itself teaches some sort of directions. And then another example is in the stars, we're told that carbon, such an important element, is created or in the huge temperatures of the star out of hydrogen and helium, no less. Makes carbon is formed, and I guess it's described in biological process or chemical processes, but it is an emergence. It's a newness, I think. So, and then to answer your question, how do you defend direction in human consciousness? The crucial thing is to tie our consciousness to this within, and assuming that, with the assumption that there's a kind of inner influence of the within in the manifest, how the directionality of the manifest, and then the argument is that we can at times there's breakthrough in consciousness of this inner ordering, which we may experience as truth and beauty. And Brian Swim says that the actual origin and birthplace of the universe is not a scientific idea. The actual origin is where you live. We are at the origin, so we're consciously tied into this within. Our consciousness is rooted within this within, and then it's thought that there are patterns or some sort of. They speak of this within having information, in-formation. So this within has some sort of formative influence on the manifest world. And this formative influence would include our consciousness. Mm-hmm. And so the experiences of truth and beauty are expressions of this formative influence that we experience, this beauty that ties us into the depths. So it's a very major issue of the nature of this inner world. Mm-hmm. And I've found it exciting, in addition to Quaker ideas of leadings, this certainly has to do with Louis Dupre, who is a professor at Yale, said that he writes about instances of what he calls intellectual intuition, in which the mind literally perceives as directly as senses do. So there's someone else's, Bohm calls it experience knowledge. There's a kind of alternative knowing, which I think is what Quakers have thought about, which we call leadings. And he says that what's the real is not just an object out there, but the real is the mind within the interval totality. Mind is an integral part of the dynamic totality that has direction, so that we can really know in consciousness this directionality and in this ordering.
So you mentioned truth as one of the values of this claim of directionality.
Yes.
And how does this proposal in the purpose of in the evolution and the recognition of this consciousness affect Quakerism? How do you actually connect it to Quakerism?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I once went on a retreat with Douglas Steer, and at the retreat he several times quoted Isaac Pennington. And I remember he said, "There is that near you which will guide you. Oh, wait for it and be faithful unto it." Now there's that near you which will guide you. Oh, wait for it and be faithful unto it. Why isn't that an expression of this formative influence of this inner world?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And Steer and others say it's always near. They say it's always near. Well, it is always near. This within is matter. It's always near. And Brian Swim says something very similar. He speaks of, in the context of the person as a form of the earth in which emergence in consciousness there is an alternative kind of knowing. He says the dynamics that fashion the fireball and the galaxies also fashion your ideas. Your specific personal dreams and desires and whole process is present in your personal self. Now right there, isn't that leadings? Leadings that the dynamics fashion your ideas. And I think it has to be spoken of carefully, because it's also there's a question of what's already in our minds, and we don't come with empty minds, and so that may kind of influence how we receive this creativity. And there has to be careful discernment of leadings and so on. But I think it speaks directly to Quakerism. Maybe you're familiar with the idea of Kenneth Golding say that Quakerism might have been ahead of its time, which could be true. I don't know. In my experience, it might be true that this gives enormous support to a sense of leadings and also the within the light within that may guide us. Mm-hmm. I think that's what they're talking about. So I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Well, I think it really enlightens it. Yes, thank you. Now, Quakerism is has a tradition of strong social action, and the person is an agent of their knowing and active life. So how does the new story speak to this tradition?
Yeah, that's very important. The Steve McIntosh I mentioned, who writes about evolution's purpose, says we are both finders and makers of reality. So, our actions, of course, are crucial. So when we are allured by beauty or truth, they do need to be given lived expression. And that's one thinks of the early friends who were called the Religious Society of the Friends of Truth, and I think they weren't seeking to live the truth they experienced. I do admire people who are activists. I consider myself only a moderate activist. I really admire people who put themselves on the line, who are really courageous people. Yeah, I've recently testified at a state house about the carbon tax, hoping that we will tax carbon and the sources of carbon. But so I do some modest activism, but I do appreciate people who are very courageous, particularly in the light of our climate crisis. I did want to mention one example that I've admired is, I don't know, do you know of Sandra Steingraber, who's a Quaker in New York State, who went to jail for blockading a compressor station at one of the Finger Lakes where they were wanting to store fracked fluids.
Oh.
And the compressor station is part of that process, and it's a nice example because she's motivated. She says she's motivated by her love of her children. She fears that contaminated water will affect the health of her children. And that's the motivation for this nonviolent resistance. And it also comes from her personal history. She grew up in an area which was contaminated by chemicals, and she had bladder cancer as a very young woman. So she knows the potential cost of contamination. And it's an experience of truth, so to speak, leading to activism. Yeah, so funny.
Well, have your understandings about the new story moved you in any new directions and brought you to any other kinds of actions?
Yeah, well, I guess my main action is this new story. As I said, when I first began to understand, I thought it's really very important culturally for us to understand this story. And so I've been writing about it and working with our group, because there's why are we, it's a mystery, not a mystery, but it's a real question of we're destroying our very home. It's very, in a way, very strange. And so this story can change consciousness. That's kind of activism, to change our consciousness, to become aware of what we're doing. And then the other thing is, uh, is about my painting. I don't know if it's exactly activism, but I for many years I did just realistic watercolor painting, which I enjoyed very much. I just something I comes fairly easily for me. Although of course I took classes and I enjoy doing it, and I won a few prizes. But then I did go to a workshop for some reason. I went to a workshop on bookmaking, and I learned about accordion books, and I thought, oh my goodness, the sequence in accordion books, it would be a way of speaking about the evolutionary story, kind of the sequence.
Oh yes.
So I was very excited. So let me show you one.
Yes, please do. I think everyone enjoys seeing it.
See, this is.
It's like a holder. Oh yeah.
And it unfolds like this.
Well, could you start from the top again and just go more slowly, okay?
Okay. This one's has on the words on the side are from Thomas Berry, that the natural world is the primary manifestation of the divine. So these are just paintings that I maybe for us and others are manifestations of the divine.
Yes. Oh, lovely. Yeah. Lovely.
So, and I don't know if this would be called activism, but it is an attempt to express this emerging understanding of what we're part of. And so maybe people hang them in their home. They're an occasion to speak about this emerging understanding. And I have one that says, one of the accordion books is that the cosmic story is our story. And then in regard to the universalism, one of my accordion books has words from Rumi, which seems to be directly relevant or an expression of the new story. Rumi hates this one. Rumi said that everything you see has its roots in the unseen world.
Could you bring it in closer to your face?
Yeah. So this is the one about Rumi.
Uh-huh.
Rumi's words, everything you see has its roots in the unseen world.
Oh, how beautiful.
So I was very pleased to have a way of putting together my instrument of painting and this new story. And I don't know, I have several. I like the words from Emily Dickinson, which I think also speaks to the new story. She says, it's a one-line poem. She says, "Not revelation 'tis that waits, but our unfurnished eyes." She said, we don't need a new revelation.
We have one already, yes. Beautiful.
And that the new story, if we could see what we're part of, if we knew what we were part of, which the new story helps, and of course traditional revelations too, that we don't need more revelation in the traditional sense. We need to wake up to what we're part of, which is, I think, the new story is helping with that. So that's been important to me to put these two things together.
And it's a way to share that expression with everyone else who doesn't read, your book,
yes.
but can experience it that way. That's lovely. Yes.
That's right. It's very accessible, so and fun and enjoyable.
Yes. So tell me about the new story group that I mentioned in your introduction. That you have at the Friends meeting in Cambridge. When was it started, and what exactly do you do in this group?
Yeah. Well, I spent a lot of my adult life in New York City, but I did move here to Cambridge 12 or 13 years ago. And so I was delighted to find at Cambridge Friends meetings 3 or 4 other people who were interested in this material. So we began to meet, I think it's nearly 10 years ago. So we've been working on this integration of the light within, if you will, or spirituality and this material from science. And what we do, we discuss articles, and we've taken turns sometimes if someone's interested in a particular topic, they would talk to us about what they're interested in. And we watch DVDs, read books. And that's where we read the Macintosh book on evolution's purpose, which was important to me. We've studied Bourgeois' book, Wisdom Jesus, which is an expression of Christianity that I think integrates well into the new story. We read a book called Presence, which is a theory about how decisions are made, seeking through silence and through openness new solutions to problems. So we studied a variety of things and had some few speakers. We've written some pamphlets. I didn't bring the pamphlet to show you, but we've written pamphlets. So it's a pleasure because it's to have people with a common interest, and it's within the Quaker context, and we assume it can be very strengthening of Quakerism, and also we have attracted non-Quakers too, which is interesting, given that it is a universal story. Speaks to
that's great. It's a universal story, correct?
Yes, and so we've grown. We sometimes have maybe up to 20 people at a meeting now. So we have grown.
That's interesting.
It speaks to the power of this story. Yeah.
Well, do you speak of the spirit or God, or what words do you use, since you have a pretty large and probably a diverse group in the Cambridge area?
That's a good question. Some people use God language and some do not. We have a whole mixture of people. So I think we focus a little more on the story itself and this within. But we do try to consider theological questions to a degree, but it is difficult. What does the word mean? I, as you probably know very well, that the problem using the word God is it has been recently most used in a dualistic world. God is a separate reality from the physical. And so when it's used in that manner, it's not integral to the new story. But then as I mentioned, some of the words, what the word might refer to, some of the ways of describing the within have been used to describe God. In other words, that word has sometimes been used, has meaning that is congruent with the new story. It's not always, hasn't always meant a dualistic. So there are times when it may be understood in the context of the new story, the word God can be used, although it's easily misunderstood in our culture. But there's someone, Dan Snyder, who says that it is possible for spiritually oriented people once again to believe, he says, although with humility and continued openness to new learning, that our God talk also refers to something that's actually true. He says that it could be from this material that the God talk has been about this within and its quality. So, so we do struggle with this. So I personally can go. I fear using the word. Often don't fear using the word for fear of being misunderstood. But at the same time, knowing how it's been used historically, before there was this separation, before the dualistic separation, it has been an important naming of dimension of what we're part of. So it's not the God that intervenes on certain occasions, but an inner creative ordering. No, well, it's a major topic. but part of the recognition that evolution is now occurring in human consciousness, and knowing how very great our influence is on the destiny of the earth, this inclusion of a sacred depth seems to be very important in some manner, because if it's an objectified world with, only matter in the narrow sense, then it doesn't have the personal engagement with it, or it can't be exploited, and there's this use mentality, as they say, can flourish. So a claim of sacred depth, however it's named, is crucial.
Mm-hmm. Well, this would lead into some. What insights does the new story have for sin and basically doing things that are wrong? Whereas the conscious, how do you build this consciousness that you're talking about here to go from the objectified world into the personal and the much deeper, where you do encounter this?
Yes. Yeah. I have to say I haven't worked or thought, I'm not an ethicist, or haven't worked very much with issues of sin and wrong, but in this context of being internally integrated into the earth and its depth, this deep belonging, then failure to behave in a manner that knows what we're part of and knows how integral we are to it, and knows that its flourishing is congruent with, is simultaneous with our flourishing. Anything that diminishes that flourishing has to be wrong or sin. But when we recognize the depth of our belonging, it can encourage caring and depth of participation. And so I think when one might be in the context of this story, I talked about leadings in this participatory consciousness of this unfolding future. To deny some leadings might be considered sin, or I don't know if sin's a strong word, but instead of emphasizing what we're doing wrong, we might emphasize what we're failed to do in this creative world that we're part of. Failure to follow leadings could be serious wrong in a world that's unfolding. So has been important, and also in our new context, we are so aware of the interrelatedness among everything, that the viability of the whole and parts go together, so that any understandings of sin or wrong would have to do with failure to support the whole, or if we value the individual or individual efforts at the cost of the whole, that would certainly be an understanding of wrong and sin.
That would certainly be a description of the world today, wouldn't it?
Yes, exactly.
As we're interconnected, but yet we are just exploding against one another.
Exactly. And I don't know if this story can be told in a manner powerful enough to that we enter into it in a way that we really care.
Yes.
See our common destiny.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And also, another piece of this, what's wrong, which makes it difficult, is one of the understandings of the new story. Sometimes things do have to be destroyed for the new to come forth, and that discernment of what we have to let go of for the new to come forward is hard. So it might not. Some destruction might appear wrong, but it might be creative, like Thomas Berry says, the age of the oil is over. Some people teach that. In that case, the dismantling of an oil-dependent economy could be a creative thing to do, although to some eyes it might appear destructive.
Yes,
You know.
yes.
So, yeah.
Well, let me ask you this. So, do you see universalism assisting the understanding of the new story, or is it vice versa? Is it circular? Is it sort of intertwined? As I hear your ideas come forth, I see just many possible relationships here.
Yeah, right. Yeah. From my perspective, having studied this story and realize how remarkable it is, I tend to think we all humans, whatever background and tradition, have to place themselves first in this story. I mean, it's our source, and as we're Earth beings, we're dependent. So that's the kind of, to me, a primary identity. And this is a spiritual identity. It's not just a physical identity. It's a spiritual, physical identity, and that is who we are. And at the same time, there is this great diversity of cultures and religious expressions. But it seems, isn't it the case that with the common source, common origin, we have the basis of holding together the diversity. Mm-hmm. Is that true? As long as the diversity doesn't deny or contradict a wisdom that comes from the story, but that we have to honor. Mm-hmm. You have to live. Does that sound, if that answers your question?
Well, I think it definitely illuminates it.
Yeah.
So it's clear from hearing you here over the past hour that you think that the future of Quakerism can be enriched by the new story. I don't know if you want to say any more about that in conclusion here.
No, I don't think I did mention the boldly that Quakerism was ahead of its time. I think now that we can see within the light of this directionality and these allure of truth has an allure, and the beauty has, in the light of that, which Quakerism has honored, Quakerism gets enormous, can gain confidence and gain kind of a wisdom in this context. Mm-hmm. So I would say in general, yes. So, I think we're very fortunate to live in this time when we can, some of Quakerism's insight finds a home. And we've been through a difficult time of the separation when the world was mechanized. Some of the assumptions have been mechanized. We're in a fortunate time when there's a recovery of a wholeness that I think can be very important to us, and the sacred depth that can help us. Mm-hmm. So, yes, I think I already said most of that. So,
thank you. Oh, great. Thank you, Mary. This has been just an incredible, outstanding hour of learning and thoughtfulness and new ideas. I think everyone who has come this far with us will be thinking about your ideas and the new story, and I urge them to pick up one of your, or more than one of your publications. I know in my meeting in Brevard, North Carolina, we've been reading your pamphlet on the recovering sacred presence in a disenchanted world. We have a Sunday school, and one of the ladies there, who's certainly not, she's well read as a Quaker, and we had worked on this book about 3 weeks during our Sunday school, and the question was, well, should we continue with this? And this woman said, absolutely, there is so much in here that we don't understand, that we need to understand. And she said, this woman gets it. She's pulled it all together with great excitement as I'm expressing it now. So I think you have brought to light so many exciting ideas. And we QUF, and I think everyone who listens to this will thank you very much for sharing this hour with us and your ideas.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to talk about them and pleasure to meet you. And thank you for your questions. And thank you for doing this. Thank you.
Well, it's our pleasure, and we want to give visibility to these wonderful ideas. So thank you again, Mary, and I hope that you have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Same to you. Pleasure to talk with you.
Okay. Goodbye now. Okay, Mary, that's all.
Okay.
That was wonderful. It was just
Was it
wonderful. It was wonderful. Oh.
It's remarkable stuff. I don't know if I do it justice, but it is remarkable stuff. I mean,
Yeah, I just think this is going to be a fantastic interview. In the past, what we've done is I will take this and make a transcription of the dialogue, send it to you, and if you want to correct it, in any way, rephrase your sentences or whatever, and then we would post the interview. But in view of the fact that we have you live like this, I'm going to recommend that we put this up immediately because we can't change anything in the video. Now,
yes.
so I for that reason, I would say let's put it up if you would agree to that without having at least read through it once. But it's really your choice, and then I'll also consult with Gail and our steering committee on the same subject. But I would get your input first, certainly.
Yeah, I think if your committee all agrees that it doesn't have too many real problems, then please do.
Yeah, I think so, because the problem is it takes me almost 2 weeks to go through and do a literal typing, and then I want to turn it over to you, and then you've got to find time to read through probably 20 pages of text. So let's get it up if we can sooner rather than later, and then we'll post the written version of it, because some people may prefer to look at that. Okay?
Right. Good. Yeah, thank you very much.
Oh, that's fantastic.
I hope your committee agrees. I don't know.
Oh, I'm sure they will. I'm sure they will.
Okay.
Well, Mary, thank you I know you've put a great deal of preparation in this, although I'm sure some of this comes very naturally, and your knowledge of this subject is so deep. But I really appreciate all the effort that you've done here.
Yeah, it is an effort to put it together, but it is also a pleasure. As I've already said, it's remarkable material. I do depend on other people. I mean, I didn't make this up, as you can imagine. From reading people who are working with this, it is penetrating the culture slowly.
Well, you've certainly given a lot of resources within your talk here. Le Chardin, Boulding, Clayton. So that anyone who is motivated can certainly expand their knowledge, as well as call on yours as well.
Yeah, I wondered if I should show you. Should I show you wait, let me show you. Our group wrote this. We wrote this little pamphlet.
Oh.
Quakers on the New Story. Maybe
and that was, who was that again?
It's called Quakers on the New Story, and our New Story group wrote this.
Oh my gosh.
And so maybe we should mention that it is available, should people be interested.
Okay.
So it's an illustrated book. And we wrote an earlier one with Phil Clayton involved.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Well, we will work out somehow a photograph here, and maybe you and Gail can talk about that when you encounter one another at meeting.
Okay.
So that we could put something up like that on the website as well to promote this.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Okay, you'll be talking to Gail, I guess.
Yeah, and I'll send you an email when we're getting close, okay? And I'll let you know what the steering committee has to say about it. And then, in addition, I will, I'll just keep you informed on when to look for it on the website, okay?
Sure, thank you very much. Thank
Okay,
you.
Mary.
Okay, be well.
Yeah, have a great day. Bye-bye now.
Goodbye, thank you. Bye.